Hey everybody, today I've got several painting ideas for you that you can recreate with gouache. I'm starting with my 100% cotton Hahnemühle sketchbook, and I am starting to sketch out a little panda here. This is somewhere in between simple and a little bit harder, I would say. I'm gonna show you the sketch in just a few seconds. And I tried to keep it as simple as possible, so there you go. This is what the sketch looks like. I stylized it a little bit. I made the head, I think, a little bit bigger, but the pandas, they do have quite large heads, and I think the reference that I was loosely basing this on was also baby panda, so the proportions are even more on the big-headed side. And the first layer here is very washed out, so I used a lot of water just to map out where everything would go. So this is not what it's gonna look like in the end. I know there's a bit of a having to trust the process type of thing happening here with gouache. Usually that's what happens. It doesn't always look perfect throughout the entire piece, but here I am already on a layer that is a lot more opaque, so I used less water here. If this was a bigger finished illustrations with a lot of details, then I would do even more layers. Usually I go from very thin and watered down layers and then work my way towards the thicker layers that have a lot more paint. And the gouache that I'm using here is mostly Caran d'Ache gouache that comes in this pen, almost like watercolors. And I also use Winsor and Newton Designers gouache, just a tube of white paint. I like to use titanium white or permanent white, so the really opaque version of white. That is what I prefer to use. And I didn't make the panda fully black. I used a dark purple. I mixed black in here and there. In some areas I used more black, in others I used less of it. With gouache generally I do use black quite often because gouache is a very soft paint and doesn't have a lot of contrast. Essentially, the darker colors dry lighter and the lighter colors dry darker. So I use black quite often to have the darkest possible color for some contrast, and I mix that black into my paints as well. I usually don't struggle with the colors becoming too muddy, and I'm also happy to report that with all of the pieces that I did here in this video, I didn't have any of the issues of the colors drying desaturated. For the first 2 pages here, I used the same sketchbook that I used in my video last week, where my paintings just dried way less saturated than when they were wet. And that is partially due to the paper, but I think it's also partially due to the paint and the fact that I only used 3 colors in my last video. I will link that video in case you're interested and haven't watched that yet, so you can watch it afterwards. But I will continue working in this sketchbook, obviously, and will continue reporting back. I have almost filled one of those, so I've already used it quite a bit, and I never really noticed that many issues with it, to be honest. It is still one of my favorite sketchbooks. And you can see the panda and a little bit of a background appear here. I wanted to have a few details here, but not overdo it too much. So I decided to have a little bit of bamboo in the background. And then the foreground is very, very simple. I did a bunch of layers here, and generally gouache paintings, even the simpler ones, take me a lot longer than watercolor paintings. So if you're following along with any of these or are recreating any ideas with gouache, then just keep in mind that it could take a while longer compared to when you're working with watercolors. I think are very quick for me, or also other materials could be a lot quicker. Markers are a lot quicker for me as well. And with gouache, I just find that I do layers, I do a lot of blending. I take my time with making the lines clean and nice and precise, and that just takes a while. So this video, funnily enough, was double the amount of time to film than last week's video, even though we have half the amount of paintings. So all of these are a little bit more time consuming, just so you know that these are maybe not the do it in a few minutes type of paintings. But I am really happy with how they turned out, especially with the little panda here. I painted a red panda in the last one, and I thought, why not also do a normal, I suppose, panda. And I'm glad that I did. And I want to do more animals because they're really fun to find a style to do them in and make them really cute. And here on the left side, I also did a bit of a sketch, and I wanted to do a very experimental sort of landscape. I've done a lot of landscapes with gouache before, and I have done several different styles and all different kinds of landscapes, more forest type ones and desert ones and everything in between. Honestly, I have done a lot of them. And here I just wanted to experiment a little bit with style and with color. I wanted the sky to be these very pink, warm colors. And then I tried to also do the other colors in very warm tones. I did use green a lot in this one as well, but it is generally a lot warmer and just a lot of different tones of green. And here I covered up the sketch part of the branches anyway, so I didn't have to sketch them out anyways. But it is what it is. That just happens sometimes with gouache. Here again, it is really messy before it gets better. It's just, I lay it down very messily in the beginning so that I can be loose and it doesn't look too stiff. And then I often go over it again and refine it some more. And this one, I also had a little bit of a mixed media approach to it. I later on went in with colored pencils and did a few details. That is something that I haven't done as much with gouache as mostly with watercolors. I've used a lot of colored pencils, but I haven't really done a lot of colored pencils on top of gouache. But it's definitely something that I am starting to do more. And I am noticing that there's ways where this can work. I would say make sure that your gouache isn't extremely thick on the paper already, because then it gets quite hard for the colored pencil to still stick on top of it. And also I would say use colored pencils that are really soft versus the ones that are a lot harder on their lead. So the Prismacolor colored pencils work quite well here. And I have generally found that they're a good match for gouache. The only issue that I have at this point is that the wax medium that I use to seal my gouache in the sketchbooks so that it doesn't rub off, it smears and smudges the colored pencil. So I still have to find an alternative for that. I did get a few suggestions, but usually the spray fixatives aren't meant for gouache. So we'll just have to try and see if any of them work really well. And then I will report when I have found something really nice. And also, speaking of reporting, of finding something nice, I bought a few new brushes. Some of those are from Princeton, and so far I really like them. They're more on the not extremely expensive, but they're not extremely affordable either. So I think one of them was quite expensive. So I am a bit precious about them, but they do seem really nice. So I will link those and all of the other stuff that I used in this video. Will try my best to leave links in the description box for it as always. And yeah, this one was a really experimental one. I just played around with style. I don't know if I like it or not. I don't think I hate it, but I don't really love it as much either. I think it's just somewhere in between for me. But it was a style exploration page, and for that it has done its job, and I think you should explore in your sketchbooks and just play around with different styles. And here we have something in a very different style now. I am using my grained toned watercolor paper or sketchbook here, and this is probably my favorite sketchbook at the moment, and I really like it for gouache especially. And I just felt like drawing some objects for some reason. I wanted to draw something that is more precise and not as organic, not really a nature scene, but also I didn't want to do something overly complicated. So I ended up painting a bunch of, I don't know, beauty products and just cosmetic products, I would say. I didn't really specify which one is which, but I did put some labels on them, and then I wrote text that you can't read. You will see what I mean, but I am quite happy with the way that I decided to stylize these. And also I used a flat brush, which I very rarely do, but I found that with these clunky objects that have a lot of rectangular shapes, it worked quite well. And also, by the way, if you want to learn more about gouache, how to get the consistency right, what the different types of gouache are and how they compare to each other, how to layer it, blend it, mix it, literally everything you need to know about gouache, then I highly recommend enrolling in my complete beginner's gouache guide course, because it goes into depth about all of these things, and it will take you from struggling with gouache to painting very confidently with it. You will have finished pieces that you can hang on the wall or gift to somebody, and you will also have learned a lot. So it is jam-packed, filled with everything you need to know. And there's a big variety of types of sections in the course as well. Some of them are recorded live sessions. So just as a little bonus, there are a few of those. And a lot of it is learning all of the techniques that you need to know. And I really went into depth with all of the blending and especially the consistency, which is something that a lot of beginners struggle with. And it is something that is, funnily enough, inconsistent across brands. Some brands you need to use more water, some brands you need to use less of it. And in the course, I explain to you how to tell which variation or which ratio is the right one for the type of paint you're using, and how to tell that you've mixed the correct consistency. Also, because for the first layer, I would use a different one than for the last highlight layer, for example. So I will leave the link to both my courses and also my online art membership in the description box below. By the way, my online art membership is now 50% less of the original price, because I decided to halve the whole membership basically. So instead of weekly classes, we now have bi-weekly classes, and now it's half the price. So this way now it is just not so hard to follow all of them, and it's easier to incorporate the membership into your daily life. And if you sign up for it, then you get access to all of the past classes, all of the past sessions immediately. So I will link that as well. It is not a YouTube membership. It is on the same website that my courses are on. So you have the same account and you can just sign up for it, no strings attached, and confirm that it is the right fit for you, basically. So while I have rambled on and on about these, here I have finished this. And like I said, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. And now I am going to use black paper actually. This is actually black watercolor paper, so it works really well with gouache. And with the first one here, since it is a bit more on the technical side, you could say, it is symmetrical and there's just a lot of planning involved. Here I took my time with the sketch and I used a white colored pencil for the sketch on top of the black because it shows up nicer. And here I was using Winsor and Newton Designer's gouache. At least I started out with that. I did the entire piece here, the butterfly and all of that with that. I also used 1 or 2 tubes of Schmincke gouache. And then on the left side, I did another painting that I started months ago. Both the butterfly and the painting on the other side, I started maybe half a year ago or so. And I never finished the second painting until very recently. And so that's why it hasn't made it into a video yet. But I am really happy with how both of them turned out, especially with the butterfly here. It is a really fun idea. I started with the main shapes here and just colored those in. And then I added more and more details on the black paper. And I think with this style that I did here, the black paper works really well because you already have a starting point. You can see here that I did a lot of these dots and I did them all over the piece in various ways. And I think that the black paper already gives you a background that you don't have to paint, so you already have something there. And for a piece like this, I think it works really well. I think it's harder to paint something like a landscape on black paper because you kind of have to think in reverse, or even a portrait would be very hard to do. But if it is something where the background itself is black and then you do more stylized flat shapes like here on top of the black, I think it works really nicely. And as far as I can remember, since I painted this half a year ago, I think I had a really good time with this one and it went really smoothly, or at least that's my memory. Sometimes you really like an art piece when you look back at it and at the time you struggled with it. Also with the other painting that you'll see in a few minutes, I didn't really know anymore why I quit it half a year ago, why I didn't continue, because after a while, when you leave a painting, you forget what the initial vision was. And if it didn't match up to that initial vision, you don't know anymore because you can't remember anymore what you had planned. So you might look at it and think it's not that bad, but at the time you didn't like it because it didn't match whatever you had planned. So sometimes if you really get stuck with an art piece, I wouldn't recommend to do this with every art piece or even on a very regular basis. But sometimes if you really get stuck with it, it can help to just leave it and let it sit for a bit and then come back to it later on. And then you have fresh eyes and you might be able to create something and have a good time with it because you might not remember why you didn't like the piece or what mistakes you might have made because now you can't see them anymore, if that makes any sense. You can also see that I used a dotting tool here. So the nail art brushes that I've been using with gouache quite a bit have a dotting thing on the other side of them. And here I thought, why not use that? I mean, this is a very intricate process that takes time. So this is really something that you can do when you feel like unwinding and really have the time for this. When you're in a rush to create a birthday present for somebody, a picture that they should hang up on the wall and you only have 2 days, this is not the piece that I would recommend you do. But if you want something that you can work on a little bit over multiple days after work and just want to unwind, then this is a really fun idea because you don't have to think as much, at least with the dotting process. When I had the main things mapped out here, the butterfly and all of that, I didn't really have to think or plan as much anymore. And also with the little lines that I did here and there, I just filled the page a little bit. And it was a very meditative process in that regard. So unfortunately, I can't do this type of style that often just because it takes so much time. But here and there, I think it is really nice. And I also like that it's not just the dots exclusively, and we also have a motif. But if you want, you could do just the dots. And I would say if you're doing it on a piece of paper, then you can use traditional gouache like I did here. But if you want to do this on a rock or any other surface, I would say use acrylic paints or at least acrylic gouache because it's just gonna be more durable. So I removed the tape in between here and then I started the piece on the left, the abandoned piece, we could say. And I just started to map something out here. I don't know if I would say that this is a landscape or what type of painting this is exactly, but I would say that this one felt harder on the black paper than the other one because I had to think in reverse. So the thing that I am trying to map out here is a tree. And then growing out of the tree, we have these glowing blue and really colorful mushrooms. And I started out the mushrooms just with blue. And then when I finished the painting recently, I decided to add a few more colors to them to make them even more interesting. And in the beginning, the two pages were still attached to each other on the paper pad, but somewhere in the middle of it, I decided to cut it in the middle, obviously. And I then had the pieces separate. So I did end up putting the butterfly one on my wall in between. So it's been on my wall for all those months. And every time I looked at it, I thought I have to finish the other one as well so I can put it in a video because otherwise it just wouldn't make so much sense that there is so much space left on the paper. I don't know. I just wanted to finish the other one as well. And this video seemed like a really good fit. So just for this video, I finally finished this piece. And if you have a bunch of unfinished pieces that have been lying around for a while, then maybe this is your sign to go to your stack and pick one of them and finish them, because it can be really, really rewarding to finally finish that piece. And then it's not in your head anymore. I don't know, people are different, but for me, I have this almost like a to-do list in my head. Here you can see this is when I started recently finishing the page. I have a sort of to-do list in my head with all of the projects that I haven't finished. And that includes movies that I didn't finish, books that I didn't finish, and paintings that I didn't finish, and all other craft projects. And it annoys me a little bit when I don't finish these things, but that doesn't always lead to me actually finishing them. But it is so rewarding when you then finally do it. So I'm glad that this chapter here is closed now. Here I also did a little bit of colored pencil on top. I just wanted the mushrooms to look a bit more, to have a bit more contrast essentially and a bit more detail. I think what I might have been struggling with originally was that it was quite hard to get more detail because they were already quite light, and then when I tried to do more white on top, it didn't really show up. So here with the colored pencils, I really fixed that. So in a way, it really helped the piece that I waited all this time to finish it. So I really hope that you enjoyed all of these ideas in this video. Make sure to check out my courses and my membership. I will link both of them in the description box below. And if you'd like to see more inspiring painting ideas, then check out this video next.